All right. Guys, my name is Sahil. I basically take care of mobile at Book My Show. If you're not using it, I'm going to be very disappointed. So, just show of hands, how many people interact with it frequently? Mobile app. Anything, any form factor of mobile. All right. All right. So, went through the whole cycle of the change from the red version to the purplish, pinkish version. Any thoughts? We're going to keep it very interactive, so I don't have a presentation, don't even intend to. Just want to continuously ask you guys questions. We're going to talk about a little bit of how the stack has changed, how we're planning on changing it more. I'm going to moonlight a little bit on our PWA that we did. Not getting into too much detail, but if you have any questions, just uh, just wave off, shoot it across, and go for it. So yeah, as of right now, where Book My Show stands in terms of mobile is we're going mobile first. We're trying to move out of the web interface. We don't want to dive in more there because the more users we see are coming through smaller form factors of either 2G phones, 3G phones, or some limited connectivity, LTE, 4G enabled Geo phones, right? So that's the direction that we're going into. And one of the biggest calls that we've taken while going in that direction is to move to React and Node infra. What we're doing is all of our front end modules or versions are going to be on React, including the mobile app. It's going to be a hybrid React native combination app. We're building libraries internally to create bridging. We're creating libraries for interactions. We're creating libraries for animations. We played around with a few libraries that Airbnb has created, a couple of contributions that you guys have done online. Interesting stuff. We want to go further, want to build something more interesting. So we've gone into that. Now coming into how React.js helped us and what validated this for us. We built a PWA, which launched about 2 months odd back. And what it did was it basically converted transactions twofold, twice. We increased our conversions from about 3% to a 6% approximation. Uh, Tried to figure out why did that happen. One of the biggest reasons was that people felt like it was an application. So the okay, so one of the biggest reasons for that doubling up of conversion was that people felt that they were interacting with an application, not a mobile website. So the biggest call was on a UI UX level. Just change the interface, try to figure out how people can interact with it like a mobile app as opposed to a mobile website. Uh, Another change that we did was we started doing isomorphic rendering. So now, fairly new concept. A lot of people don't understand what that means. Is just to simplify it, you render the page on a server and you spit it out. The minute you start to do that, your entire paint and interactions, what Gaurav was talking about, is already achieved. You just spit it out to the browser. It uh, uses virtual diff or virtual DOM to sort of render this and start to interact with the user. That was our biggest win in terms of how people started to play around with the PWA. Another big benefit was of moving to React.js was we can start controlling the state redux. Big benefit. Again, you can just modify smaller components inside your web application as opposed to having to re-render the entire page. On every click, you don't load a new page. There's no need to do that anymore. You just load elements that need to be re-rendered. So yeah, overall, that was basically what let us go down the path of React.js, sort of what created the segue for us. Another big aspect about DMS that a lot of people don't understand is people want to book tickets and they want to book tickets most likely in a vicinity. Now, more often than not, what happens is you lose connectivity in those small sample size vicinities of yours. So once you lose connectivity, what do you do? So what we're trying to figure out right now is how we can enable the offline mode. We've already achieved login, purchase history, and you can sort of use the purchase that you made while you had connectivity and go to the venue and watch the movie, you will have the ticket with you. Now, what we're trying to figure out is how can people interact with this more. So we're trying to create an entire set of developments around offline connectivity. So the offline mode is another big pitch for us. Now, one thing that also really helped us out was adding service workers. So along with this whole Node, Redux, React setup, what we did was we intentionally put in service workers to actually take over the computational tasks of everything that we were doing, right? So from actually processing your login to actually sending you ticket data, sending you show times, updating those show times, all of this happens through service workers. So if you want to understand that more, just uh, let me know. I'll probably later dive into it a little bit more.
Finally, how do you guys are in PW, right?
Cool. So one thing that a lot of you guys probably do, even right now in your companies, other than housing, I know for a fact, is you all run on a very set architecture of client work will happen, through JS engine, something like a Django will be used on the back end, and you'll have a SQL database doing all your storage. So what we ended up doing was we ended up separating this. We created a Node.js layer that all the legacy backend systems interact with. What that lets us do is your entire serving of APIs is done from server to server. So currently in our setup, it happens on an intranet. That's why we get extremely high load times when our backend service is either written in PHP or written in Go or written something else, .NET, whatever. They interact directly with the Node.js layer. That Node.js layer then talks to the front end. So now what that lets us do is it lets us have a JavaScript framework on the front end, which handles our UI UX, and a JavaScript server, which is Node.js, which handles all of the computational and all of the archiving of data work for us. So essentially, that's how also we achieved isomorphic, because if we would have gone down the path of having a PHP server or a Golang server or anything, it would have created another mess because it would interact API to API again. Uh, Now coming to what we're doing next. So I think this is going to be extremely interesting in the life cycle of Book My Show, and it has come because of React Native and the evolution in React Native. Our mobile apps right now, they're completely on Android being on an MVC and iOS being on MVVM. What we've done is we've separated the view layer completely. We've created UI libraries for each platform. Now what we're doing is we're planning on getting rid of these UI libraries and porting all of it in React Native. So what we're going to do is React Native is going to take over the entire UI UX or view component of our architecture, and we're going to have model, network, data, memory, all of that handled natively. Uh, One big benefit for this is we can modify UI on the fly according to business and people who find that fancy. That's a big win. But for us, we can start to sort of use the JS engine independently on different devices to render the view, create the experience. We don't need to allocate separate memory. We don't need to utilize separate memory. Threading is completely handled through the JS engine. So one big benefit for us to go down the path of React Native is that we'll have a trimmed down code base in terms of view, because if you go through the BMS application and you try to go through each flow, there's at least 200 views that you come across. So when we sort of templatize this and make it into a more of a component structure, you'll have uh, you'll have about 200 views, but you will have them separated as components. So we can reuse those. It gives us a lot of reusability. So that's where we're heading with React Native and how we're going to modify our mobile applications to serve with React. So anybody done that in the past here on except you? Anybody done that in the past on trying to use hybrid, trying to use you would probably use Ionic, you would probably use any other framework to cater that. Okay. Any experiences there that you want to highlight?
Which I mean, it's a pain game as well because of the fact that Perf really sucks. I mean, especially on low power devices, at least in the past. I'm not really sure how it is now.
Okay.
With the Angular 2 rewrite, I guess there's a bit of a perf boost. But with React Native, I found it very usable actually. I mean, the CLI is awesome. Pretty much play around it and get bootstrap really quickly. I see it working for me.
Okay. Anybody else who's played around with React Native and Native? Okay. So just to sort of just talk to you guys a little bit about what would happen once you start into it and what kind of issues you could face, what kind of things that you should probably look out for before development into React Native. One thing that you're going to face is if you're using a router to actually go from screen to screen, you're going to face an issue in interactions, which is something that is very heavily required in many apps. So what we do is we try and conceptualize an application, a design, your entire transitional flow from screen to screen. We can't have that, selective to just slide in or a vertical scroll up. We can't have that. So what we did was we tore the router library apart on how these states are handled, and we started to figure out, instead of a FIFO, how do you manage these states, right? How do you do it in a circular queue, or how do you do it in a you could probably do a last in first out. So these are the kind of challenges that you'll face when you're developing with React Native. It's not as mature as probably I would have I was hoping it was when I began 3 months back. But these are few things that you'll have to face. One more very important aspect of React Native is you'll be very tempted to use network inside of it. So you can directly uh, do calls. You can directly handle network pretty well in React Native, but you won't be able to leverage off the power of the device. So, for example, if you're running on, for example, a Nexus 5, right? You need to separate out certain things that native handles better and React Native handles better. Data and network being two very important aspects. So, uh, in the entire way that native code handles networking, you can avoid all kinds of conditions of, if you're already connected and you're getting a payload. If you want to stop that payload in the middle, you can just terminate the connection and stop. It won't locally archive that network packet that you called for. So you can do that out of the box with native. With React Native, you need to do a lot of modifications to actually handle that condition. I think one more thing that you could probably, from the beginning itself in developing views in React Native, target is make sure that you don't confuse yourself with components and styles. Understand what a component can do and understand what a style can do. I'll give you an example. So I had one developer who had come on board, and he created like a full application, and each element in the application was a component, from a button to a card to a load more CTA at the bottom to a showtime selection, which ideally you shouldn't do. For example, if I'm using a button in 10 places, if the styling is changing, don't make it a component. Make styling specific to that. You can separate out the JS so that you can include it wherever you want, but don't make it a separate component. So I think, yeah, these few things in terms of development, the way we use Redux is actually quite similar to what housing does. We handle state management pretty much exactly that way in our PWA, not our React Native application. We're heading there. Another very important thing that since the basic one-liner of the talk was what's next at Book My Show, one thing that I would want you guys to tell me is, what do you do on Book My Show? Just when you interact with the application or the PWA, what is it that you guys do?
This is a focus group now.
That's fine.
Product research.
You do product research. Love it. What else?
Promo code.
Promo code. Promo code to do what? Okay. Anything else?
Booking tickets the nearest.
Booking tickets, fine. What else?
Nearest.
Figure out what's playing, event booking. All right. So, for about a decade now, the only focus of Book My Show has been to book your show, right? Now, we claim that we're the largest entertainment platform, all right? Which means that we provide you with video, text-based content, image-based content, news, all of that. Anybody use Book My Show for that? No. So
You're asking for nerds here.
that's fine, but they would. But they would. So I'll tell you what we'll do. What this sort of an architectural change for us is enabling us to do. It's letting us target that audience, right? So today, if we need to address content to a certain set of users without hindering the booking flow, the easiest way for us to do it is to cater them a different kind of a UI UX, right? If I can try and address that audience in a smarter way, I can probably leverage off their affinity to content. Now, how do I do that? When you call Book My Show to provide you with the application response, the easiest way that I can do it with is that in your basic movie card layout, I start giving you content, right? The best way to understand that is getting getting my state from React Native, using my Node.js server and changing the view. This is not possible using a standard. It's possible, but it's horrible using a normal API structure. So these are the kind of things that we're trying to do, right? Another very important thing about React Native that it's enabling us to do is it's letting us create uh, views specifically catered to content. So now what that means is when you're entering Book My Show and you're going into the booking cycle or you're going into the booking life cycle, we start showing you a different kind of a synopsis. If we realize that you're only engaging with video, we only start showing you video, right? So these are the kind of things that we're targeting through, and it's been possible only through React Native. The problem with native is that every time you need to make a change, you need to send out an update, which we need to stop doing. I think these are the basic pointers that I wanted to sort of shed light on in terms of how we're running with uh, product and development level on Book My Show with respect to React Native and Node. Uh, I want you guys to question me on a few things if you have any.
So what problems specifically around routing do you guys have?
Around?
Routing in native.
So, sure. So, it's not a problem per se. It's just that it's handled better in native. So, routing of, let's say that I needed to move from a native screen to a React Native screen, right? If I have my routing handled natively, I don't need to bother about that actual data passing between native and React Native. It happens out of the box. I just need to pass a prop and it just takes it. Go for it.
You said about offline experience. So what
Right.
kind of offline experience you are providing in your app and how do you do it?
Sure. So, one thing that we do offline right now is we do purchase history. So, if you picked up a ticket, you can view that ticket offline. You can go to your cinema and scan the barcode. That's the extent of the offline experience right now. What we would ideally want you to do is we would want you to come in. We would want you to probably interact with a static page like a synopsis or basically where you see a little more info about the movie, which is already catered to you once. We store that and we start to cater that to you. Or, for example, it could be so something in development we did a POC with was beacons. We tried to take you from your position right now to your seat or your venue using beacons. So we did that during the IPL at Wankhede. Basically, you enter your gate, and a lot of people don't know where their stand is or where their seat is. So we placed beacons and we showed you that, and that was completely done offline.
What do you use for offline storage? What solution do you use?
So we use local storage as of right now. All the data is
So for
local.
example, you use,
Yeah.
I have a question. So you said you're handling networking natively in a React Native app. What do you mean by that?
So yeah. Basically, what we're doing with React Native is we're just overriding the viewport. Uh, Now, what happens is the entire API call or the network call that is supposed to happen to fetch all that data for you is already happened on the native screen
Okay.
before you enter the React Native screen. Since we're just overriding the viewport, all we do is we pass those values. We don't do parsing on native. We're doing the parsing on React Native itself. It's just that we're calling for the data before.
So, like, does that translate into any sort of gain?
Yes, it translates into me not showing you a loader. So
I mean,
any time to load the screen or the page.
but there will be some sort of network latency, right? So you have to wait for.
The network latency is handled previously by it.
So if I navigate from screen A to screen B,
Right.
you need some data from your network to render the content on screen B.
No, so we're actually handling that a little differently.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, so we're handling that a little differently. We already know what the view, a lot of the content on the React Native screen is already known because we have it from the previous screen. I'll give you an example. So today, when you land on the Book My Show app, you get a stream of movies, right? When you click on book, we already have that synopsis data. We already have that show times data with us. We just pass that on to the React Native screen, and it shows up the show times.
You didn't make a network call.
I didn't make a network. Essentially, I didn't make a network.
I'm talking about the situation where you make a network call. So what's special about that?
Sure. So
In this case, also just made a network call way before it was
Yeah,
required,
yeah.
right?
I made it way before it was required. Yeah.
That's another thing. I'm saying, how does this help your case? I mean, if you make the network call natively compared to you dispatching the native call from the JS.
Sure. So one thing is just like what you were mentioning. So let's assume that I need to make the native call, right? I can make it on the main thread, right? Or I
call
could
is anyway made on the main thread.
I can make it on the background thread also.
So React Native uses OKHTTP on Android.
Correct.
OKHTTP is anything.
Anyways, handled on the main thread.
OKHTTP is what Java developers anyway use.
Correct.
So if you're dispatching a network call from a React Native JS thread, it's going to
Go
delegate
through
that to
the main thread. Sure.
OKHTTP thread and make a network call via
Sure.
OKHTTP.
Sure.
It's not going to make it on the
But
JS
you sort of supersede that layer, right? When it goes from JS to OKHTTP and then routes it through the on the main thread.
That's going to anyway happen. You need to
If I do it directly through OKHTTP, it just
no, but anyway, you will need to pass message from the JS thread to tell OKHTTP to make a request, and then OKHTTP will send the response over the bridge back to the JS thread with the response.
Sure.
So the message will go over the bridge in any case. You can't avoid that.
Sure.
Because the data needs to go from the native thread to the JS thread to render and respond to it. So I'm just asking, how did that help your case? You making the native calls from native thread rather than using something from the JS thread.
Fair enough. So one thing that we evaluated was when we made a large data set call, right, through native in comparison to React Native, and then we parsed that data on React Native. It took a lot of time to render. One thing that got eliminated was when so it's most likely a time difference on when I'm moving from one screen to another screen. If I make it on the previous screen and I make it with the same, and I pass it in the same batch, I get it, and the only thing that happens on React Native is parsing. So that's pretty much what we've targeted as of right now through making the call on native and then passing the data on to React.
So any opinions on the service worker API?
Any opinions on it? Is still too early on to actually come up with stats on it. But over the past 2 months, service workers have helped in comparison to what we were doing earlier with Angular. Overall, I think the way we've used service workers is just to sort of manipulate data coming in from the API as of right now. So too early, we're planning on using it in a few other places. Still trying to evaluate what would need to be done in terms of, let's say, a service worker carry forwarding API, just the API data in multiple places or multiple screens. So we're still trying to evaluate that. Cool. Anything else?
Any other questions? Going once, going twice.
So thanks a lot, sir.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Hey, your charger is out.
Yeah, cool, man. So how many guys are for